Femi Williams, 19 years old, a Nigerian international student in the UK. One moment, he's chasing his dream of becoming a lawyer. The next, he's on trial for rape. He swears he didn't do it, but the system assumed he did. How will he prove his innocence when the world has already made up its mind? But Femi knows if he doesn't fight back, he'll end up in jail and lose everything. Therefore, he did the unthinkable. He takes on the UK legal system, defending himself in court. Will he outsmart the prosecution, or dig his own grave? Femi Williams sat in the defendant's chair, hands folded, his face unreadable. The air inside the Old Bailey courtroom felt thick, oppressive, charged with the silent weight of judgment. He had spent countless hours watching trials unfold from the public gallery, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined himself seated on the wrong side of justice. 19-year-old Femi Williams, the prosecutor's voice rang out, charged with sexual assault. The words sounded distant, unreal. Femi had studied law for the past year. He knew how these things worked, but this wasn't a television drama. This was real, and his freedom hung in the balance. The judge, a stern-looking woman with piercing eyes, shifted in her seat. How does the defendant plead? Femi's assigned barrister, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Femi had been watching court cases long enough to know that in a case like his, young, black, accused of a serious crime, things didn't always end in fairness. The prosecutor, a polished man with a clipped accent, stepped forward. The evidence is clear, he said. The victim identified the defendant as her attacker. CCTV footage places them at the same location that evening. Forensic evidence suggests physical contact. What more do we need? Femi's stomach twisted. They were painting him as a predator, a violent offender, but they were missing something, the truth. As his barrister shuffled papers, Femi watched him closely. He wasn't convinced the man was invested in his case. His heart pounded. Every instinct told him he couldn't leave his fate in someone else's hands. "Excuse me, sir," Femi whispered, leaning towards his barrister. "I'd like to speak." The man turned, surprised. "That's not how this works." Femi sat back, jaw tightening. Maybe not usually, but today things would be different. During the recess, Femi's barrister sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Look, kid, you want to win this? Stay quiet. Let me do my job." Femi met his eyes. "With all due respect, I've been studying law since I could read. I know the system, and I know when I'm being set up. If I don't defend myself, no one will." The barrister chuckled dryly. "You think you can out-argue a crown prosecutor?" Femi's voice was steady. "Yes." When court resumed, Femi did something unexpected. He stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to challenge the integrity of the prosecution's evidence." The judge arched a brow. "Mr. Williams, your barrister should be handling this." "My barrister has agreed that I can represent myself." "With his support." Femi lied smoothly. The barrister's eyes widened, but before he could object, the judge nodded. "Proceed." Femi took a deep breath. "The prosecution claims my DNA was found on the victim, but may I ask when and how the forensic evidence was processed?" The prosecutor scoffed. "It was gathered and processed according to protocol." Femi leaned forward. "So you wouldn't mind sharing the forensic report detailing the chain of custody for the samples collected?" The prosecutor hesitated, and in that moment, Femi knew he had found the first crack in the case. Femi turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, I was at the location that evening, yes, but I never harmed anyone. What the prosecution won't tell you is that the police report contains inconsistencies in the timeline of events." The jury shifted in their seats. The judge tapped her pen thoughtfully. Femi pressed on, gaining confidence. Why would the police fail to document crucial details if the case was as clear-cut as they claim? No one had an answer. The arresting officer took the stand. Femi watched him carefully. "Officer, you stated that I was apprehended near the scene." "That's correct. But were your body camera and CCTV footage reviewed?" The officer frowned. "There were technical issues with the footage." Femi folded his arms. "Convenient." A new witness was called to the stand, a friend of the victim who claimed to have seen Femi behaving aggressively. But as Femi cross-examined her, inconsistencies in her story began to emerge. She hesitated and contradicted herself, and soon it was clear her statement had been influenced by external pressure. Femi stood, facing the judge. "Your Honor, DNA evidence is only as reliable as the way it is collected and handled. If the process is compromised, the results cannot be trusted. Was the forensic analyst who processed this sample ever cross-examined?" The prosecutor hesitated. "We have the report." "But not the expert," Femi interjected. "If DNA is the pillar of your case, then why hasn't the person responsible for verifying it been questioned in court?" Femi presented a map of the area. "The prosecution claims I committed the crime at 10:15 p.m., yet my phone records show I was on a call across town at that exact moment." The jury murmured. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Williams, are these records verified?" Femi nodded. "By my service provider, this evidence proves I could not have physically been in two places at once." Femi addressed the jury directly. "If this case truly had no reasonable doubt, why are there so many unanswered questions? Faulty forensics, contradictory witness statements, a timeline that does not match." The jurors exchanged looks. The prosecutor's confidence wavered. Desperate, the prosecutor tried to refocus on emotional appeals. "The victim's testimony is clear," he insisted. "She remembers the defendant." Femi kept his tone measured. "Memory is fragile. Eyewitness misidentifications are a leading cause of wrongful convictions. Without hard, irrefutable evidence, is it fair to send an innocent man to prison?" Silence. The case was unraveling. The judge, once skeptical, now watched Femi with newfound respect. She allowed him greater freedom to question evidence. Femi delivered a powerful closing argument, leaving the jury deep in thought. The prosecution's rebuttal was weak. The jury disappeared for hours, debating. Femi sat quietly, heart pounding. The jury returned. The judge asked for the verdict. The foreman cleared his throat. "We find the defendant not guilty." A breath Femi hadn't realized he was holding escaped. His mother sobbed in the gallery. The judge looked at him thoughtfully. "Mr. Williams, you have a sharp mind. Consider using it for more than just saving yourself." Femi smiled. "I already am, Your Honor." Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Stay tuned for more twists and drama.